Today, I bring you a very important video, my emphatic entry into the Smogon Tournament scene. So, for anyone who is not aware, the official Smogon Tournament 23, I believe, has started up recently, and that is essentially just a gigantic knockout tournament. I want to say somewhere in the range of 5-12 players, and just straight knockout all the way until the finals. And it's so big because anybody can just enter, whereas a lot of the other tournaments have more strict requirements, like to qualify for the ladder tour, you need to finish in the top 10 of the ladder during one of those phases. But for this one, all you needed was a Smogon account. And so I decided to just sign up and see how I do. And the format is Gen 8 OU and best of 3. And so that's a bit different to the battles I've been covering so far on the channel, because National Dex means that the full Pokedex is allowed and there's Megas and Z moves from the previous generations. Whereas in Gen 8, those things aren't there. So it's just the things that survived Dexit. But for the first game, I'm going to be using this team built around getting in Choice Specs Blacephalon to break. And to facilitate that, I've got an eject button Toxapex. So that can just come in, take a hit, immediately get ejected out, and get me a free switch in into the Blacephalon or the Katana to start doing some damage. What this team's also got that's kind of interesting is a Smackdown Landorus. The point of which being Smackdown the Skarmories, the Corviknights, other Landoruses, and then start earthquaking them. But against this team with 4 flying types, that's pretty unlikely to happen. So in terms of matchup, there is no fire resist, and so Specs Blacephalon is going to absolutely tear through the opponent's team. And that's probably just my main way of winning, is getting in the Blacephalon as many times as possible and just flamethrowing, overheating, smacking everybody as hard as I can, and then potentially opening up somebody else like the Katana in the late game, or even just immediately killing everybody with the Blacephalon. Whereas on the opponent's team, it's a bit of a weird team. But what's very threatening is that Cloyster, because firstly, I'm especially defensive Toxapex, meaning that I'm not taking those hits as well. And also with the eject button, if I've not triggered that yet, then I take the hit and then get kicked out, so I can't haze it or to get rid of its boosts or anything like that. And so the Corviknight has to stay really healthy and be able to body press. I need chip, and I just need to be sure that I don't let the Cloyster in on my more passive mons that it can take advantage of, or even the Landorus, because it's so bulky that it can survive those hits. And so with that, we're gonna get into the game. I lead with the Clefable, and the reason that I do that is because I want to just get my rocks up so that I'm breaking a potential Focus Sash on the Cloyster, I'm hitting those flying types, I'm just generally being useful. And the Skarmory lead suggests similar. What I'm looking at this Skarmory thinking, from it being the lead, is that it might potentially be a suicide lead Skarmory that wants to get up the Stealth Rocks and Spikes, taunt slower things, sturdy, Custap Berry, etc. But I see that I actually outspeed it, and I'm able to just Thunder Wave it, and it fully paralyzes, and I can get my rocks. And that's a really, really good start for me. And the full paralysis is kind of lucky, but I don't think it overly matters. And the Whirlwind on the opponent's part, I think you really need to have hazards up to be Whirlwinding, because Whirlwind on Skarmory can be very nice when there's rocks and spikes up and you just keep shuffling the opponent's team around, racking up that hazards damage, and they can't switch into their threats that hit Skarmory because they'll just get whirlwinded straight back out, and so they have to just kind of hope to get lucky with it. But whirlwinding without any spikes just doesn't really accomplish you very much, especially when you're paralyzed and you need to be just prioritizing getting those hazards. But I get whirlwinded into the Corviknight, and I'm gonna just U-turn straight back out. I was thinking there that maybe it'd be Rocky Helmet and I'd at least find out that information, but the lack... Yeah, it's not Rocky Helmet, it's just leftovers, but this lets me get in my Blacephalon, and sure, a spike goes up, but that is a very worthwhile trade because I'm immediately forcing a lot of progress with that. And they're going to go into the Tornadus, take a lot from the Flamethrower, and I'm thinking I don't want to get knocked off, and if you knock me off, I can just make you kill yourself with the Rocky Helmet. So I'm going to just go into the Corviknight to U-turn out. The Blacephalon does live a Hurricane, but when it's my Wincon, there's no need to be reckless with it. I can just be a bit more careful and make sure I'm getting it in safely to cause more problems later on. They're going to go into the Landorus, which I don't agree with because you get to it KO'd by the Specs Blacephalon, and you're leftovers, you're not scarfed, you're not outspeeding and threatening me. I don't think it really gets you very much, and now that I'm in the Corviknight, it works out for me even more. And they're going to just defog away the rocks, which is definitely worth doing because the rocks are messing him up a lot more than I'm getting messed up by that layer of spikes, especially when the Tornadus is not heavy-duty boots. And so I'm just going to U-turn back into the Clefable, and I can just get my rocks back up pretty easily, as they're going to go into the Thundurus. And Thundurus, alongside the Cloyster, is one of the bigger threats to my team because of my specially defensive mons. Toxapex is hit super effectively, and Thundurus is horrifyingly powerful, and the Pex isn't really threatening it back. Clefable, it's full Spadef, but Thundurus is just so strong that it can break through Clefable, which isn't all that bulky. Katana's a resist, but it's going to just die because it has pathetic Spadef. And they're going to nasty plot up as I just Moonblast immediately because I'm thinking I need damage on this thing. It's the main thing I'm keeping the Clefable alive for. Moonblast is also pretty free into his team, but I just need that Thundurus to start getting hit. And I'm then going to go into the Landorus, take a shit ton from the Flash Cannon. It reveals Life Orb. And the reason that I go Landorus is because, as we've established, 4 flying types and a Cloyster, which is really bulky and doesn't really care what I want to do and can Ice Shard me, I'm not going to get very much mileage out of the Landorus this game. And so it's fine, in my opinion, to just sack it. And revealing the Life Orb, that means that you're also not heavy-duty boots on the Thundurus, which is going to really limit your longevity and staying power. And so with this kind of a set, Life Orb Nasty Plot, you just have to immediately force a shit ton of progress with it, because if you don't, you just wear yourself out and die very, very quickly. So I get my leftovers and I just let the Landorus go down. That's kind of whatever. And now I can go into Blacephalon and get a kill. And he lets the Thundurus go down when it's such a threat to my team, but also there just isn't really a switch in or answer to Blacephalon on his team. And so into the Landorus, which has shown itself to be leftovers and just dies. And I calced that, and even a Spadef Landorus is still getting killed. And I think that in a tournament game, you do need to be calcing those kinds of things. And while you're not really switching in with anybody, you could either go into the Tornadus. It says 14, but it would survive the rocks because it regenerates another 33. Either go into the Tornadus and threaten to knock me off or Hurricane me, or go into the Bisharp and potentially Sucker Punch. But as is, he just kind of gives me his Landorus a bit unnecessarily, and if a Landorus isn't living, a Cloyster definitely isn't. Somewhere in the very back of my mind, I thought there, what if he's Scarf Cloyster? But I also thought, if you're bringing a choice Scarf Cloyster to a tournament game, then you fucking deserve to win. So it's not, I Flamethrower again, get the kill, and now in comes the Tornadus, ready to threaten me out, but only after having sacked 2 of his team. Eject button Pex into the Katana, which is Choice Scarf and is able to just knock off for the kill. And I think there, you can just go Skarmory because a Katana isn't really going to be threatening you very much. But my opponent leaves in the Tornadus and dies, and now the Skarmory's going to come in. And I did kind of think that by revealing that I'm Choice Scarf, I do risk letting in the Bisharp, which can Swords Dance up on a knockoff. But I figured that I can go into my full health, physically defensive Corviknight, live a hit if it doesn't crit, body press and kill, so I was still fine. And otherwise, I just need the Tornadus out the way because it can be very annoying and disruptive to my team. And I could maybe have gone into Clefable and just kind of tried to Moonblast about that way, but then it's letting the Skarmory back in and it's hazards, and just, I decided to be more aggressive with the Katana. I'm going to just go hard into Blacephalon, get Whirlwinded out again, and for the second time, Whirlwind isn't really helpful when you don't have the spikes and stealth rocks up to force that kind of damage with from it. And thinking he's probably going to Whirlwind again from how he's been playing, I just Moonblast and get Whirlwinded out into the Toxapex. And again, at this point, it's just Spike, thinking I might get Whirlwinded. Now I try another hard Blacephalon on another Spike, and I think by spiking again there, that does potentially weaken the Katana to a point that a Bisharp can pick it off with Sucker Punches, but the issue is just that you're, again, letting the Blacephalon in, which, if with a complete team you weren't switching into, you're especially not switching into it now. And so I'm able to just kill that Skarmory, and now I'm in a very commanding 5-1 position as the Bisharp comes in. And at this point, I'm just kind of thinking, what is a way that I can lose this game, even in such a commanding position? And that's why, even expecting the Sucker Punch, I'm going to just let him kill me. And the reason for that is that, suppose I go into the Corviknight, or into the Pex, or into whoever else, and he Swords Dances. At that point, I could lose, because I could get Sucker Punched on things, I could either get crit by a knockoff, or I could get flinched by an Iron Head if they were going to go to try and hack me down like that. And so, by staying in with the Blacephalon, I guarantee that he's not able to Swords Dance and potentially sweep me. And tries for it there, but I've got the body press, and so I'm able to just kill the Bisharp and win fairly comfortably. And I've spoken to the guy, and I just got the impression from this game that he's not the most experienced of players, only been playing for a bit, whereas I have on and off since like 2013. And with that in mind, props to the guy for, having the confidence to sign up to and give a tournament a go. Like, this is the first one that I've ever signed up to after playing for such a long time, but I'm able to take the first game, and so because it's a best of 3, that brings us onto the second. And this time I'm bringing a different team, which is based around a Heatran trapping things for the Zeraora, the Rillaboom, the Calm Mind Tapu Fini to be able to just more effectively break through things. There's also a more typical, normal Spadef Landorus and support type Tornadus, whereas he's got the same team. He was apparently under the impression that you had to bring the same team every time, but you don't. And I actually think that this team that I've got is perhaps not as good of a matchup into his team as my first one, which is mainly just because I don't have that immediate Blacephalon to break open everybody whenever I get it in. But regardless, we're gonna just go for it. I maybe wouldn't have changed my team if I wasn't expecting him to as well. But he's gonna lead with the Bisharp as I lead with Kinsey Kensington, the Heatran. My lead just being because it's a bit less reliable in that it can miss, but like the previous game, there is no fire resist. I can just Magma Storm fairly freely. And I did think I can Earth Power here because Magma Storm can miss, but calcing it, this being, I believe, a slightly more defensive Heatran without full special attack investment, Earth Power has something like a 30% chance to kill, so I figure just with that, I may as well just take the chance on the Magma Storm, and I missed turn 1, incredible, and I get knocked off. But with that damage, a Sucker Punch isn't going to kill me, and so I can then just Earth Power, because from the way he'd been playing, I thought, well, that's brave, staying in on the Heatran. You're probably going to just do that again. And so with a Life Orb recoil, I know that an Earth Power can then kill. I don't have to risk landing another Magma Storm. And now in comes a Cloyster, and I just Magma Storm and kill it. And I think at that point, you need to be going into something that outspeeds and threatens to kill me, because I quad resist an Ice Shard, and otherwise I'm faster. And so something like this Thunderous would have been able to just immediately threaten me out, because Cloyster has atrocious special defense. It's not living anything, really. And if you're a Focus Sash, I can see wanting to just go for the Shell Smash and try and cheese out a win that way, but it wasn't Focus Sash, and even if it was, Tapu Fini can live any one hit from a +2 Cloyster, and it's not gonna King's Rock bullshit me down, because I believe that was banned recently, and also it would have had to have been Sash to get to that point in the first place. But I just let the Heatran go down because it's at 3% and outsped by things. What else is it really gonna do? And the Thunderous shows Thunder, which I think is a bit odd on a non-rain team, but that's what he's running. So I just go into the Spadef Landorus. He's going to Nasty Plot as I just take the opportunity to get my rocks up. Focus Blast, I don't really know why, but I'm going to just U-turn out. And at this point, the reason I go into the Tornadus is to U-turn again, try and force another Thunder, get back into the Landorus. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to rack up enough damage and also enough Life Orb recoil that I can go into the Rillaboom and just Choice Band and Grassy Glide kill, because it does something like 50% even resisted. And again, like in the previous game, a Landorus isn't doing a whole lot, so it's fine for me to just give up its HP like this. He Thunders, which I think is expecting me to try and keep doing the same shenanigans going between Landorus and Tornadus, but I don't. I just U-turn, and now we are in Rillaboom range. I Grassy Glide and kill, and I think the staying in there is probably just thinking, well, I resist, I'm not going to die. But again, in a tournament, you want to be using damage calcs. You don't want to be going, I resist, I think I'll be fine. You want to be calcing and knowing for sure. The Tornadus is then going to come in, and so I just go back into my Landorus, take a Hurricane fairly comfortably. And at that point, I can just very freely go for the Toxic, and the reason for that is that expecting the switch, the Skarmory we've seen is a slightly tragic Skarmory that isn't that much of a threat if I Toxic into it, and if I'm able to Toxic the Landorus, that brings me very close to just winning with Zeraora, because all that really needs to happen is for the Landorus to get weakened to the point that I can take it out with a knockoff, and then I'd outspeed and kill the rest of the things. And so I'm able to get off that Toxic, and then I get knocked off, and that's fine because I can U-turn out. This Landorus, by the way, it's got something like 29 IVs in speed. The reason for that is to underspeed other Landoruses to get off the slow U-turn to get the initiative. And that's going to allow me to bring in the Tapu Fini. And at this point, I can just Calm Mind on the U-turn, and the Skarmory comes in. It wants to Whirlwind me out, but I'm carrying the Taunt, and the reason for that is that, yeah, it stops Whirlwinds, but the main point is that it means that a Toxapex cannot haze you. And we see the Skarmory doesn't have any attacks, which I really dislike because, well, as we can see, Taunt completely shuts it down. And the other problem with that kind of a Skarmory is that it's just so passive that it just is going to get taken advantage of. And I think the Whirlwind is supposed to be to try and stop things from taking advantage of its lack of attacks, but as we see there, it's very easy to circumvent and just completely shut down. And I keep Calm Minding up. Grass Knot isn't going to do very much. Tapu Fini is quite light anyway, and now I can just click Surf a whole lot of times. I go for the Draining Kiss there just to get some HP back. I could have just Surfed. I don't really know why I didn't, but it's not going to make a huge difference. Landorus is going to come back in, die, and that's going to leave just the Tornadus, which, as we've seen, is struggling to do any damage, really. If you really want, you could Hurricane, try and confuse and massively hacks me down, but none of that is really likely to make a difference. And so with that, I take the second game and the series. And so in about 2 weeks, I'll be moving on to the next round. Don't know who I'm going to get yet. We'll definitely cover it on the channel when I do, but good game to my opponent, and props to him for entering a tournament whilst still fairly inexperienced. And hopefully by the time more tournaments roll around, he's going to be able to keep at it and get a whole lot better, and I can potentially have a rematch with him at some point. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll hopefully see you vaguely soon with some more tournament coverage when it gets to that, and if I stop being lazy and can be fucked, then some more draft games. Goodbye.